My dad was the one that inspired me more than anything. He was very interested in science, and even as a kid, I was into all kinds of scientific ideas.
John Gorman may be the most famous Australian you've never heard of. His groundbreaking medical research is estimated to have saved millions of lives.
It makes John Gorman really one of the unsung heroes of Australian medical science. He should have got a Nobel but didn't.
His path to medical pioneer began with an unquenchable curiosity and an instinct for adventure. After completing his medical studies at Melbourne University and St Vincent's, John Gorman set off overseas with 3 mates.
I think I was interested at that time in becoming a surgeon, so I had the idea of going to America and then to England.
He had a stint working in paediatrics at a hospital in South Bronx before landing a job at the prestigious Columbia Presbyterian Hospital as a resident medic in blood banking and laboratory medicine.
And as soon as I got in the blood bank, I knew that's for me. I was happy to get away from patients. And of course, one of the things that I got away from was the responsibility. You know, we had 2 children die that year right in front of me. It was I didn't need that.
His time in paediatrics, both in Australia and the US, made him familiar with RH disease, for which there was no cure.
At one point, 10% of the neonatal deaths in Melbourne were caused by RH disease. And the thing about RH disease was it's a silent killer. The mother feels perfectly good, and all of a sudden she's got a stillbirth.
RH disease occurs when a mother's blood is incompatible with her unborn child's RH factor, which indicates presence of a particular protein. About 85% of babies are RH positive, while 15% of mothers are RH negative.
When you have that combination, the baby's red cells cross the placenta into the mother's circulation, and they start an antibody to RH, the RH antibody. The RH antibody comes back through the placenta, back into the baby, and it destroys the baby's red cells.
These babies are born, bloated with brain damage and very often anemic, and they very often die. It was a nasty disease.
John Gorman's brilliant idea came after reading a chapter in a pathology textbook by Australian Nobel laureate Howard Florey that the presence of an antibody can inhibit an immune response.
Well, I knew in 5 minutes after I read that this would stop the RH antibody. That if we gave the mothers RH antibody, they would not make any themselves. The solution was the problem. If you injected the antibody, you would stop it.
And, caused a sensation that you could give the very antibodies that cause the disease to prevent the disease.
Well, that was the theory, but how to test it and on whom? New York's notorious Sing Sing maximum security prison,
Sally helps me with my accounts,
made famous by Hollywood, provided willing male volunteers for Gorman and his research partner, Vince Frieda.
Well, it was kind of what was done in those days. Today, it's an absolute no-no, but in those days, it was a kind of a custom.
Trials at Sing Sing showed that those exposed to RH-positive blood cells didn't have an immune response if they were injected with passive antibodies. But advancing his theory required different test subjects.
They needed a woman, a pregnant woman preferably, to sort of prove that they were right.
Kath Gorman, the wife of John's younger brother Frank, was the ideal candidate to trial the treatment. She was expecting her first child and she was RH negative. Frank was RH positive, which put their subsequent babies at clear risk of developing RH disease.
We had their guarantee that it would give me no after effects. Again, we did think about that, but we thought, well, in for a penny, in for a pound, we'll do it. We wanted more children, so we went for it.
She was a nurse, and so she kind of realized the clinical situation.
But getting a vial of experimental human antibody to Kath from New York was no small feat. She and Frank were living in London at the time.
They shipped it in a foam container with frozen ice.
This was apparently totally illegal. You weren't allowed to ship an unlicensed drug out of the country.
I don't think we thought about it. I think we thought that, yes, we wanted extra children, you know, and that we hoped John's injection did work, and that for John's sake we hoped it worked as well as ours.
It did work. Kath didn't develop antibodies from having Rh-positive baby Kieran, and a year later, in 1965, she had Angus.
He proved by being healthy that John's injection had worked, and therefore in medical history he sort of became, as he calls himself, the miracle child.
Now tell me more about this miracle child.
He was 10 pound, bellowed like a bull, sort of wanted to be fed.
The fact that Angus was safe in Kath's next pregnancy was a wonderful result.
John Gorman's breakthrough treatment, called Rogam in the US or Anti-D in Australia, was major medical news.
The control of Rh hemolytic disease, you know, is one of the major advances in the last 5 years in preventive medicine.
Gorman even appeared on NBC's Today Show with Barbara Walters.
Very often with vaccines or new developments, there's always everything is fine, and then there's sort of one hitch, or there are side effects, or there is something that's not absolutely perfect about the vaccine. Is this the case?
Oh, this looks very good. It's been used in male volunteers and now in mothers for 3 years.
It was indeed good. Millions of babies have been born safely because of the work of John Gorman and Vince Frieda.
The lives he's saved were newborn babies, babies with their whole lives ahead of them. So, you know, in some quantitative way as well as the emotive way, this discovery and this medical intervention has dramatically changed the lives of millions of people.
But John Gorman says his work's not done yet. At 91 years young, he's involved in an international consortium of scientists and doctors to eradicate Rh disease worldwide.
I'd really like to see the job completed so that the undeveloped countries, babies there, don't have to suffer from Rh disease.
And what of his very first patient, Kath Gorman? After Kieran and Angus and adopting Ian. You had how many under 7?
6 under 7, and then we went 4 years for Jacob. Yeah, so we had 7 under 11, and that was very good. And then we just stopped. No more came.
It's a great satisfaction to see something like this work and now be put in place as part of medical practice, and everything's working extremely smoothly. Yeah, no question. Wonderful feeling.